In the Company of Charity is a podcast by the Daughters of Charity of St. Vincent de Paul. Each episode will be discussing the church, society, and service to others, all through the lens of the spirit we received from St. Vincent de Paul, the Saint of Charity. Join in the conversation by sending your comments and questions to companyofcharity@gmail.com.
So welcome to In the Company of Charity, podcast of the Daughters of Charity, and I'm joined by Sister Liz Schoberg.
How are you doing? I'm very good. Very good. This is a really cool episode.
It is a very cool episode. I'm really excited about it. And so today we are in the company of Sister Salvatrice, who will be doing an interview with Sister Mary John and Josephine Lomasney, who's a pre-postulant in their house in New Orleans. And I think what's exciting to me about this episode is that it really is kind of a snapshot of what kind of morning coffee or, as sisters are getting ready to go out or they've come back from ministry and sitting around the table, just chatting and talking about, their lives, but realizing as we listen to this episode that really seeing 3 generations of Daughters of Charity in the process and in formation. And there's just something really very heartwarming and very exciting about that as well.
Exactly. In fact, there's a quote in our constitutions and it says, "The call heard by the first sisters is ever the same." And it just reminds me of that little thing we hear of the church, ever ancient, ever new. And here we have, a sister and Sister Mary John who's been living this call faithfully for decades, day in and day out, the ups, the downs, and just being faithful to God and the call every day. And, and then we have Sister Salvatrice, who's been in for a few years, and then Josephine, who's at the very beginning of her process. And it's a discernment for sure. We certainly pray for her and we always hope that folks will stay around, but certainly we support people in their discernment, and that's why it's called the discernment process.
Yeah. I love that quote that you were saying about the call heard by the first sisters is ever the same. And when you think that the call heard by the first sisters was in 1633 or even sooner than that, the establishment of the Daughters of Charity back in the 1600s, you say all of these years, women have been coming to the community, called by God to be of service to those who live in poverty. And we all come for somewhat the same call, but we stay for different reasons. We see ourselves in our ministry in different ways. We're teachers, social workers, nurses. Sometimes we're teachers and we're doing social work. We're doing whatever it takes to be of service to those who are in need. And so that call is so powerful within the community. And yet we come in such different ways. Our vocation stories are so very different. And you realize then the awesomeness of God who just, plucks us all out of just such interesting lives and brings us to this place of service to him. And we end up all around the table together talking about our lives, and it just supports us. One of the things for me that really also is really inspiring is the sense of community that, sitting around this table, you're talking to women who have been through what you've been through. You've gone through this process, this period of formation, and we've all been through it. We've all been through it in our own ways, and it unites us in a very unique way, I think. And you'll hear about some of that as the episode goes on, just about what that process is like and how both the community supports us, how our sisters support us, and really how God supports us in prayer. That all of it together, as we say, we're here because of community, because of service, because of the call of God, and those all come out in this episode. And it was really very kind of enlivening for me.
Right. And I don't, when you talk to sisters, I don't think it's just unique to us, but to a lot of communities where the formation has evolved quite a bit over time. And, you hear folks who came decades ago where they came right out of high school.
Exactly.
Or, maybe they worked a year or two. But, nowadays we see young women who maybe have gone to college or have worked for several years, and that, in some ways are already adults in their lives or professionals. And whereas, some of our sisters, when they were first coming, they basically grew up in the community.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, even you and I are good examples of that. I came at 36. I was out in the world, and you came, younger, right out of college, or at least a few years after college. And even that, I think, that sometimes I think people can think that could divide us, and yet in the sense that, some who came so young and really, as you say, grew up in the community, and those of us who grew up before the community and came. But one of the things you realize in formation is no matter when you come, it will mature you. It will definitely bring you to a new level of consciousness about yourself, about who you are in the world, about who you are in the church. And, when it's the right call, when you've answered that call and it really is what God wants from you and of you and for you, for me anyways, the experience has always been that I'm definitely feel more myself, more who God intended for me to be. And, and that's a powerful thing about formation. I think no matter when we come, God will work with it. He'll work with whoever we are and bring us to the fullness of who he wants us to be. And I think that comes out so beautifully in the words of all of the sisters that you'll hear. So let's get on to the episode, because they certainly can say it better than we can at this point. So Sister Salvatrice, great interview with Sister Mary John and Josephine.
All right, let's do it.
Thank you guys for doing this podcast. We are sitting around our kitchen table here in New Orleans, Louisiana, sharing a little bit about the call of the daughters being ever the same. From the very beginning of the vocation journey, through work and up into retirement. What it's like, how it's been, and how we experience the charism. So I'm going to just begin by asking you, Sister Mary John, if you wouldn't mind just say a little bit about yourself and how long have you been in the community, and then we'll get into some more details later on. But if you just want to introduce yourself a little bit, and then I'll ask Josephine to do the same.
Yes, happy to be here. I'm a daughter of charity, and I've been one for 67 years, and it's been very good. I came as a registered nurse, and so most of my service has been in the health field.
Thank you.
And I'm Josephine, and I just began pre-postulancy in August of last year. And my background is in teaching, so I've been working with Head Start and also at a local Catholic school since I've joined the Daughters.
All right, thank you. So when I was in the 6th grade, I had this dream about being stuck in a convent, and that was sort of the beginning of my vocation journey. Just that dream, and then having some discussions afterwards, and ongoing prayer and dialogue throughout my life. But how old were you when you first heard the call, or first had an inkling that maybe you were being called to the Daughters of Charity?
I was in high school, and I was trying to figure out how I could serve, and I thought maybe I'd teach math, but I was very unsure. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Later on, and I decided I wanted to be a nurse, and then being a nurse helped me to want to be a daughter of charity. I wanted to do more for the Lord. I felt a calling to be a nurse, but I felt a greater calling to dedicate my life as a daughter of charity.
Which came first for you, the desire to serve in general, or knowing the Daughters of Charity, having met the Daughters of Charity?
Well, since I met the Daughters of Charity when I was in first grade,
Oh, okay. Very young.
all the way through high school and nursing school, I have to say it was meeting the Daughters of Charity that made me know about them.
Mm-hmm.
And I went with them to visit the poor, which I didn't know at the time was their main concern, taking care of the poor.
Awesome. What about you, Josephine? How old were you when you first heard the call?
Well, I first started thinking about religious life when I was in 7th grade. I went on a middle school discernment day with a religious community in Ohio. I forget what the community's name was, but there was just a group of us middle schoolers just hanging out with the sisters all day long. And one of them, Sister Maximilia, took me aside while the others were playing soccer and asked me if I'd ever thought of becoming a sister. And I told her no, but I never lost sight of that question. And then in high school, my family moved to Emmitsburg, Maryland, which is where St. Elizabeth Ann Seton's shrine is, and there's a retirement community there with the Daughters of Charity, and I volunteered at their nursing home, so that was my first exposure to the community. And just the draw of, in high school, I went on some service trips with the daughters, and seeing them serve in community and in prayer and bringing their service to prayer drew me to the community.
Yeah, for me too was that service piece, and I actually didn't know about the daughters. I worked with them, well, not with the sisters themselves, but in a ministry connected to the sisters, but I didn't realize it at the time. And it wasn't until later on when I was actually going through formal discernment that I realized, oh, that place where I had worked, the daughters, ran that place, So I saw some connections there between how I was being developed in my professional life and my desire to just serve as a social worker, and my spiritual life and that connection with the daughters. So there was some overlap with that as well. So the discernment process for the sisters has changed over the years. Some of us spent a little more time thinking before coming, and some of us spent a little more time thinking after coming to the community. So Sister Mary John, can you tell us a little bit about your discernment, what that was like, and how old were you when you took the leap?
After I graduated from nursing, there were other opportunities, I guess I should say, and I kept feeling the pull to be a daughter of charity and the pull not to be a daughter of charity, back and forth. And so I had to pray over that much and talk to the priest and etc. And I was pleased when he said, go and see, join and see. If it's not for you, you will not stay. And I thought, oh, that was such a freeing comment that he made, that I proceeded to go right ahead to the community after I got my RN. It was a wonderful feeling of, this is where you're supposed to be. And so that was 67 years ago. And I have never changed my opinion about this is the place I'm supposed to be.
Yeah, somebody asked me, well, when do Daughters of Charity retire? And I said, do Daughters of Charity retire? I said, I live with a sister who's 88 and she's still going to work. But I guess we just keep going.
If we can.
Yeah. Whether it's working full-time, working part-time, working in a ministry of prayer, working in an apostolic ministry.
Yes.
Yeah. Josephine, what about you? What has your discernment been like? Because, times have changed in the past 67 years. discernment has a little different twist these days. So what has your discernment been like so far?
I guess it feels like in some ways it was a little bit longer because the community had to get to know me and I had to get to know the community too first before I had the courage to take the leap, and the sisters wanted me to take the leap too. Mm-hmm. So I knew the sisters back in high school when I volunteered at their nursing home, but they weren't really where I was feeling called to. But in 2015, I went on a Sikh conference in Nashville, Tennessee, and met for the first time one of the vocation directresses with the daughters. And Sister Teresa and I kind of connected over that week-long kind of youth rally. And she started calling me about once or twice a month, and just kind of forming more of a spiritual friendship and guidance than anything else. And then she started inviting me on discernment retreats, come and sees, and she even set up for me to go and spend 9 days in Chicago at one of the sisters' houses, where it was just me and the sisters who were living at that house. It wasn't a formal retreat or anything, but I got to see the sisters' normal day-to-day life, and just see how, I might be able to live that life. And that stay in Chicago really helped confirm for me that, I could possibly do this life. So that's when I kind of had the courage to apply and see, let's take the first step. And see where God leads. So now I've completed my first year of pre-postulancy, and I've been accepted for the second year of postulancy. So we'll see where the Lord keeps on leading me.
Awesome. Yeah, you're right in the middle of it, right in the middle of that discernment. And,
yes.
And just trying to figure out God's call. And I think in some ways, discernment goes on lifelong,
yes.
And different kinds of things, but that initial discernment of whether or not do to move forward, to become a sister, is a lot more intense than the discernment we do ongoing, I think. But so you will go through this year of postulancy, and then the process would be going forward from postulancy. A person would apply to become a daughter charity, to be incorporated into the community, and to spend 18 to 24 months in formation in the seminary, which is, is similar to novitiate for other communities, before being sent out on mission. So all told, we're looking at, 4 years or so before being out on mission as a sister. Sister Mary John, was it about 4 years of process for you as well, from day one to being out on mission, or how did that go? I know it wasn't, which is why I'm laughing. But tell us about it. Tell us about that.
Well, no, it wasn't. It was much shorter. But I say, because I went to the Daughters of Charity from first grade through grade school, through high school, through 3 years of nursing school, that I was halfway formed in the ideas and the spirit of the Daughters of Charity before I came. But my postulatum was 3 months, and my seminary was less than a year. So I stayed there at the provincial house after I received the habit, receiving our wings, and our habit was the occasion of leaving the seminary.
Before you go on, tell a little bit for the listeners who might not know what that means, to receive the wings.
Oh, our headpiece was like the flying
nun.
Flying nuns. It was a starched headpiece, which was very much like the wings of a big bird. And you had to learn how to make it and how to wear it.
It was very distinctive. Very distinctive.
It was the distinctive mark of the Daughters of Charity in those days. Yes. Yes, and still is seen some places.
Sort of an iconic
Yes,
image.
yeah, iconic image. Yes, yes.
But we don't wear that today, of course.
That's correct.
Yeah.
And I was very. If people said, "Did you like changing to a normal headpiece?"
Mm-hmm.
And I said, "Oh, I liked it, as long as I had a specific headpiece
Mm-hmm.
to indicate that I was a daughter of charity. I was pleased." And in the clinic, we had many poor people, and it was before the times of Medicare. You can even imagine that. Poor people, sick, didn't have insurance to cover their expenses. They came to the Daughters of Charity. And then when they didn't come in for clinic visits, didn't show up, we would go and make a home visit to check on them, to see. We'd walk down the streets, around the corner, or wherever. That was our method of transportation those days. And we'd bring some little fruit or some small articles that might be helpful to them. And we would be able to see the family as well as the patient or the client who would be the one that was coming to clinic. And that helped a lot, because then we could teach them a few little ways of how to help make life easier for the patient. Help them with their medicines or something, some little something that would
When you were in those opportunities of going to people's homes, were you thinking about the fact that this was how the first sisters started? That this was something that the sisters were called to do from the very beginning, to nurse people in their homes? And
yes, I was. Yes, when St. Vincent got the Daughters of Charity started over in Paris and St. Louise, they started out. We were the first sisters who were not cloistered and could go into people's homes to help take care of the poor. And so it was sort of a natural for this Daughter of Charity, just new Daughter of Charity, to be able to go out to the homes of the poor.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, it reminded me of the stories that I had just learned from the history of the Daughters of Charity, and it was good. I'd bring, we never went by ourselves, take a student nurse with us.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And sometimes the student nurse would be a Daughter of Charity, who was a young one who was learning to be a nurse.
Mm-hmm.
She was already a Daughter of Charity, but she was learning to be a nurse.
Yeah, so you kind of were unusual for your age, that you were a nurse first and then became a Daughter of Charity, whereas a lot of the sisters became Daughters of Charity and then got their nurse training.
Yes.
So a little leader of the pack in nursing.
I was 20 years old when I came to the community.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, so 67 years of good hard work.
I came a little later as well, and after having studied social work, and I was doing, at the time when I encountered the daughters, was doing work in people's homes, as a social worker, and so that was a very strong fit for me as well, to say this is what we do, this is who we are. And Josephine, how old were you when you made your application for postulancy?
I was 22.
And already in the teaching field, already in education.
I had already taught 4- and 5-year-old preschool. But living in Emmitsburg, I had seen the sisters teaching at Mother Seton School there.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where I first encountered the daughters and their service, was at Mother Seton School. So we had the teachers, the nurses, and the social workers between the three of us.
That's right, all represented here. So thinking about that discernment process and that call of the daughters, Sister Mary John, what would you say is some of the most challenging parts of coming to community for you? Was it leaving your family? Was it moving away? Was it learning a life of obedience? I don't know. What would you say were some of the most challenging parts of this whole process for you?
It definitely was leaving my family. From the very beginning, it was a matter of my family getting to know the sisters. And for my mother knew them all the time. And my immediate family, I should say, knew the sisters. But then my grandmother and others who didn't know learned over the time that how wonderful the community is in not just accepting the person who's coming to be a daughter of charity, but it seems to be accepting the family.
Mm-hmm. And what about some of the, highlights, some of the most fun or interesting aspects of that whole process, coming to community in those early days?
Well, some of the things we did for celebrating big feast days and things like this was when a sister made her first vows, and we frequently had them. We had 52 sisters in our group now, so we maybe 3 times a year we'd have first vows.
It's a lot of partying.
Well, we would have a wonderful meal and flowers and a special dessert, and we would either put on a little skit or have some competition in a ball game, or just ordinary things that folks do for fun.
Mm-hmm.
It didn't disturb us at all that we had a big bonnet on our head. We just clipped it up with a money clip.
Clipped it up and kept on going.
And we tucked up our aprons so that they wouldn't trip us and be in the way, and we went right on and had a good time.
What about you, Josephine? Some of the challenges and some of the fun stuff that you've experienced in these early days of discernment and transition and figuring things out.
Well, I guess it wasn't so much a challenge for me being away from my family. I'd already moved away from them the previous year, so that wasn't too hard for me. I think kind of the most challenging thing was moving into a new community with sisters that I didn't know and getting to know each of them on a more personal level to create kind of a family away from my family, which y'all have now become. But at first it was hard because I didn't know you all at that deep level yet. But forming those relationships and being able to see God in each of you and learn from your examples has been a real blessing. So I'm glad that I have stuck with it thus far.
We didn't even pay her to say that. I know one of the best things has been becoming a better bocce ball player.
That's definitely a highlight.
You're always killing me with the bocce ball. I introduced it and you took right over and started winning. It's good. It's challenged me to become a better player.
There we go. That's definitely been one of the highlights, being able to spend time in community playing those fun games and being introduced to Scrabble by Sister Mary John. So her and I play almost every night. So she beat me by hundreds of points in the beginning, but now I'm beating her. So it all balances out.
That's right. Well, as we wrap up, do you have any advice or words of wisdom, Sister Mary John, having lived this life for 67 years? Any words of advice for Josephine, who's just at the beginning stages and making her debut as a postulant pretty soon?
I have lived with Josephine now for a year, and I think she's open to learn things, and I think that is the biggest thing that all of us need, to be open to learning new things and opportunities that come across our way, and opportunities we should go the other direction. How to make choices, and to keep a sense of humor and a lightheartedness. I think life is sometimes can be very serious, and we need to pray ask God to help us on those hard spots, but we also need to be more gentle with ourselves and think of the positives as much as possible, because if you look for negatives, you're going to find them wherever you're looking. But if you look for positives, you're going to find them too. Mm-hmm. Yes, and so I think we have to be open to God's working with us, because none of us are doing this by ourselves. Yeah, with God's help, He's got us along so far. He's going to see us the way.
And Josephine, what about you? Any words of wisdom or advice for somebody who might just be starting to hear that call for the first time, just maybe getting an inkling that maybe they ought to dip their toe in and see if this life is for them? Any thoughts about that?
Definitely discern well, pray about it. But once you've prayed and discerned, don't keep on praying and discerning, staying in that one place. At one point in time, you do need to make that leap with a certain community. So don't be afraid to take that leap, because you can't be a perpetual discerner. You've got to try it out in order to know for sure, in quotes, because we keep on discerning even as you've entered the process. But you need to enter the process first before you keep on discerning.
And now it's time for your Vincentian Pulse.
Hi everyone, it's Sister Elizabeth. Today we wanted to talk a little bit about 3 very special feast days for the Daughters of Charity. So November 27th is coming up pretty soon. November 27th is the Feast of the Miraculous Medal. November 28th is the feast day of St. Catherine Labouré, the visionary of the Miraculous Medal. And on November 29th, the Daughters of Charity celebrate the foundation of the Company of the Daughters of Charity that occurred in 1633, quite a long time ago. So we just wanted to talk a little bit about each of these days, why they're important to us and why they're really important to the Church as well. So on November 27th, we'll celebrate the Feast of the Miraculous Medal. The visionary, St. Catherine Labouré, had 2 visions, actually. She had 2 apparitions, one in July in 1830 and the second on November 27th, 1830. And it was at that time that Mary came to her and asked her to talk with her confessor and have a medal struck. And Mary showed her what that image should look like, and that those who wore this medal would receive many graces. And the medal was struck a few years later. And those who have worn it over the years, I imagine some of you today might even be wearing a miraculous medal or have worn one over time, that it has brought graces to others. People in faith and prayer and believing that God would answer their prayer have received many graces and blessings. The miraculous medal, if you've never seen one, you should really try to look it up. But the vision that Catherine received was quite elaborate. Mary showed her an oval frame upon which Mary herself was standing on a globe. From her hands, there were like rings that had gems that were emitting light and rays of light that were showering the globe below her feet. On the other side and around the edge of the medal on the front side, the words in French, but translated were, "O Mary, conceived without sin, pray for us who have recourse to thee." On the other side of the medal, Catherine was shown 12 stars that circled the oval frame, and also a large M that was kind of intersected by a cross. And below the M and the cross were 2 hearts, one the Sacred Heart of Jesus, the other the Immaculate Heart of Mary. This image was struck, as I said, about 2 years after this, and people have been wearing it all this time since 1830. It's a great blessing to the Church, sacramental, that reminds us of the graces of God and reminds us that when we pray, that God hears us and will answer our prayers. On November 28th, we celebrate the feast of the visionary, St. Catherine Labouré, but not because she was a visionary, but because Catherine was a very simple, very humble daughter of charity
Catherine lived the rest of her life living the secret that she was, in fact, the visionary. She never let on about it. People didn't know that it was her, although some suspected. And again, if you look it up, you can hear the whole story about and see the whole story of Catherine Labouré, a daughter of charity who lived her life very simply, very quietly in service of those who were poor. On November 29th, we celebrate the foundation of the Company of the Daughters of Charity in 1633. So full 200 years even before Catherine Labouré had her vision of the miraculous medal. In 1633, women religious at that time were cloistered. Many of them would enter religious life and serve from the cloister. But St. Vincent and St. Louise de Marillac had a vision, had a new way of thinking about how to serve the poor. And it was, in fact, to go out, to walk the streets, to be out with people, to be closer to where the poor were, so that the poor did not always have to come to the institutions, but in fact the institutions would open their doors and reach out to those who needed assistance. I think Louise often would call people the bashful poor, those who didn't know how or were too ashamed or too bashful, too shy to ask for help, but that there was a way in which the church needed to reach out. And so in 1633, November, St. Louise de Marillac opened the doors of her home. There had been women following them and kind of following the teachings of St. Vincent, listening to his sermons, listening to his missions. And one woman, Marguerite Nassau, had been kind of journeying with them, and she was one of the first Daughter of Charity. But then in 1633, on November 29th, Louise de Marillac began the formal formation and the formal teaching for these women who would begin a new religious community, one in which the cloister walls were kind of broken down, the doors of the cloister were opened, and a new way of living religious life began. It would take years, of course, to develop this, but this was the day it all began, and here we are, so many years later, still living the life that St. Vincent and St. Louise founded for us. So it was a time of great witness to how the Holy Spirit can really kind of rock the world of the church, and brought women out of the cloister into the street so that they could be serving those who were poor in a way that had never been done before. These 3 days, very special days for the Daughters of Charity, we'd like to ask you to join us in prayer during this time. And again, as I said, check it out. Google it, check it out online. Learn a little bit more about these 3 very special days. And we also want to wish you a very, very safe, happy, joy-filled, family-filled Thanksgiving. We all have so much to be grateful for and so much to thank God for. So let's join together in prayer and thanksgiving to God for all that He's given us. And we ask you especially to pray to God that our community can continue to live in the fidelity of our charism of service to those who are poor.
This has been In the Company of Charity podcast. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.